What's going on, everybody? Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. We hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you're still feeling good after Thursday night's Dallas Cowboys 41-35 victory over the Seattle Seahawks. A little bit closer than I think any of us would have liked, but a win is a win is a win is a win. The Cowboys are 9-3, and I know we are all feeling pretty good about them in the overall landscape. I did a video on Friday here on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. If you have not yet already, please consider subscribing right down below, where I talked about some next day thoughts after we all had a bit of a, some time to think on it, a night to sleep on it. And I'm back here again. I'm putting this together for you on, what time is it? Saturday, about 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, because we get this question a lot this time of year at Blogging the Boys. People ask, what should I be rooting for, particularly on weekends like this or Sundays like this, Sundays that are yet to come, as today is Saturday, when the Cowboys already have a win in the bag and everybody still is going to watch the NFL, and people have a bit of curiosity in terms of what is best for the Cowboys. What should I be rooting for? This is something that we focus on, obviously, as the playoff picture gets closer. It doesn't make sense to have these conversations in October as an example, but we are officially in the month of December, which means we're going to be doing this every single week at bloggingtheboys.com. I'll be doing it on my socials. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram or Threads at RJ Ochoa, on TikTok, rj.ochoa. We have an article, like I said, and we'll have a video for you every single week here on the YouTube channel where we talk about this and kind of break it down. If you do want to read the article, head on over to bloggingtheboys.com. The fantastic Jess Haney wrote this earlier in the week, actually the day before the Cowboys played the Seahawks, as you can see the date right up there. I'll put the link to the article down below. Jess went a little bit more in detail than I'm going to, and I'll explain why in just a second. If we take a look at what the Cowboys have yet to come, obviously, they have now played their Week 13 game, as mentioned. You can see that green, beautiful check mark as they took care of business against the Seahawks. The Cowboys will be back in action next Sunday night against the Philadelphia Eagles before back-to-back road games against the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, and then they will return home for a Saturday game against the Detroit Lions. You'll see there right there, December 30th. That is the night that Jimmy Johnson's going into the Ring of Honor. Troy Aikman will be there on the call, obviously, as that game is on ESPN. So it's important to note all that information because the Cowboys have 4 games coming up against playoff teams, right? The Eagles are going to be in the playoffs. The Bills are potentially going to be in the playoffs. The Dolphins are definitely going to be in the playoffs. And the Lions are obviously going to be in the playoffs as well. Now, 2 of these games, no disrespect, obviously, intended towards the Bills and the Dolphins, are a bit less meaningful than the others. Now, I would love for the Cowboys to win every single game. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it would be cool if they lost those games. But if the Cowboys could only win 2 games across the rest of their season, you would want them to be against the Eagles and the Lions. That's just the simple math of it all, right? These are the most significant games because they're against teams in the Eagles and the Lions who are contending for the top seed in the NFC. And if the Cowboys have any hope, obviously, of being that team themselves, they have to pick up those wins and establish those tiebreakers and assign losses to those teams in question. So if we take a look at the NFC standings entering Sunday of Week 13, the Philadelphia Eagles annoyingly remain up top with a 10-1 record. The San Francisco 49ers, who will be in the city of brotherly love on Sunday afternoon, they are favorites, by the way, the Niners are right there with an 8-3 record at the 2 spot. The Lions, having lost last Thursday on Thanksgiving Day, fell to 8-3, which allowed the Niners to leapfrog them. They are 8-3. If you're newer to NFL fandom and you don't know this, if you win your division, you are one of the top 4 seeds automatically. These have been the rules forever. And the Atlanta Falcons, despite being below 500 with a 5-6 record, are the 4 seed currently, having leapfrogged the New Orleans Saints last week with a victory over them in Atlanta. That leaves the Dallas Cowboys, our Dallas Cowboys, with a 9-3 mark at the top wildcard spot at the 5 seed. The Minnesota Vikings at 6-6 now. They are on bye this week. And the Seattle Seahawks, of course, the team who the Cowboys just beat, fell down to the 7 seed. We will see, obviously, what happens across the rest of the NFC landscape. You see the Packers right there, right in the mix for a playoff spot. The Rams right there as well. The Saints technically in the mix for both the wild card and the NFC South title, as is the case technically for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's why we established the cutoff line right there. If you can hear my dogs in the background, they are very passionate about this subject. So the reality of all of this is that the Philadelphia Eagles are the overwhelming favorite to win the NFC East. I know that you don't want to hear that. I don't like saying it, but it is simply the truth at this point in time. And the reason for this is if we take a look at the Cowboys' remaining schedule here, those are 4 very difficult games. In fact, 5 if you consider the one the Cowboys just played. It's possible, don't get me wrong, some people would argue it's probable that the Cowboys are going to win all of those games, but I think if we're being fair, if we're being conservative, they probably drop at least one. Maybe they drop 2 of those games. You just never know. versus the Philadelphia Eagles in week 14. Obviously play the Cowboys, but in week 15 they will visit the Seattle Seahawks, who we hope play the way that they did on Thursday night. And then the final 3 games of the season for the Philadelphia Eagles, and we care about them relative to this discussion because we're talking about the division and they are the Cowboys' top competitors in the division currently. Weeks 16, 17, and 18, where you can see the Cowboys facing the Dolphins in Miami, the Lions at home, and the Commanders on the road, who will very likely be mathematically eliminated from playoff contention at that point in time. Across those 3 weeks, the Philadelphia Eagles will host the New York Giants in week 16. They will host the Arizona Cardinals in week 17, and they will visit the New York Giants in week 18. So they have a much softer, a much friendlier end of schedule than the Dallas Cowboys do, which is why wherever you look, maybe you're frustrated. That's why people believe it is so likely that the Eagles are going to ultimately wind up winning this thing. Now, I've said something incorrectly here. For the last few weeks, if you've been watching or listening to me in different places, I've said that if the Eagles lose tomorrow on Sunday and lose next Sunday to the Cowboys, they will still be in first place in the NFC East. That is not true. I don't know how I misread this, but hey, we're all human. It happens. Maybe I didn't have my cup of coffee that day, which I have right here. But if the Eagles are to lose on Sunday, and odds makers believe they will, and if the Eagles lose next Sunday to our Cowboys, and odds makers initially believe that they will, most lines for Cowboys-Eagles is off the board, or are off the board because the Cowboys have already played. Anyway, that would leave the Cowboys and the Eagles both with a 10-3 record on the night of December 10th. The Cowboys would be in first place in the NFC East at that moment in time, but with a significantly harder 3-game stretch than the Eagles, which again is why people believe the Eagles are going to win this thing. All of this leads us to say we obviously want to see the Eagles lose. We want to obviously see the Cowboys have the best chance that they can to win this division, but we have to accept reality on some level as well. We have to accept that the overwhelming likelihood, and this is what Jess wrote about in his article, is that the Cowboys are very likely not going to win the NFC East, and therefore the Cowboys are very likely going to enter the NFC playoff picture as the top wild card, or as a wild card team in general. We hope it says the top wild card because we want to see the Cowboys face the winner of the NFC South, because it's not going to be a very good team. It would be hilarious, by the way, if the Cowboys played another division winner with a sub 500 record after all the 500 conversation that has sort of circled around the Cowboys this season. But that being said, all of that diluted suggests and means and implies and ultimately yields that we want to see the Cowboys win. We want to see the Eagles lose, but we want to see all of those top contenders to the wild card spot and in the wild card race lose as well. That's why I've been talking about here at our network that Thursday night's game against Seattle was huge. I mean, look at it. The Cowboys are now 9-3 and the Seahawks 6-6. The Cowboys have a 3.5 game lead on them, that half game, because they have the head-to-head tiebreaker if things ultimately come down to that. But we do want to see everybody underneath the Cowboys lose here as well, because if that happens, if they lose and the Cowboys continue winning, and even if the Eagles wind up winning the division, that would give the Cowboys an opportunity, as we look at the remaining schedule here, to potentially manufacture their own bye. If they don't get the 1 seed as the NFC East winner, the Cowboys can potentially look at that Week 18 game against the Commanders and say, hey, look, the Eagles have already locked themselves into the division. We're already locked into the 5 seed. We don't have to play all of our starters. We can get guys some rest that need it, whatever the case may be, and get ready for the wild card round ourselves. Okay, that is all the information that you need to know. So that means it's time to get to the actual rooting guide for this week. This is what we are advising you to root for when it comes to the Sunday Week 13 action. I'll explain the Lions thing in a minute, but we want to see the Lions beat the Saints. We want to see the Browns beat the Rams. We want to see the Niners beat the Eagles. That one is the most obvious. And we want to see the Chiefs beat the Packers. I'm going to start with the Chiefs and the Packers here, because the Packers are 5-6, and they are fighting for one of those wild card spots. And this same logic, by the way, applies to the game above it. We want to see the Packers and the Rams lose, because as you can see, they are right there. The Packers are the 8 seed. The Rams are the 9 seed. If we enter Week 14 with the Cowboys at 9-3 and the Packers at 5-7, the Rams at 5-7, that gives the Cowboys even more room for error relative to the wild card race, which is what we want yet again. Back to the rooting guide here. The Niners over the Eagles is rooting for the lesser of two evils at this point in time. We have to see the Eagles lose some games if the Cowboys are going to catch them. They're running out of opportunities just from a scheduling standpoint, and the Niners are without question, outside of maybe the Cowboys, the best team left on the Eagles schedule. It would be awesome if the Niners won. It would be awesome if the Eagles lost. It will suck, though, to have to root for the Niners. I totally agree with you. Now, the Lions over the Saints is an interesting one, because as you can see, the Lions obviously are 8 8-3, and if they win this game, they will be 9-3, just the same as the Dallas Cowboys. And maybe you're still holding out to hope that the Cowboys can somehow, some way beat the Eagles, have the Eagles lose some games. Maybe they lose to the Giants, the Eagles, of course, Tommy DeVito, I don't know, whatever. Dallas surpasses, leapfrogs Philadelphia in the NFC's conversation, and then has a chance at the 1 seed themselves. That is still possible. It is still technically in play. And if that is something you want, then you obviously want to see the Lions lose games so that they do not take the 1 seed themselves. It would be awful if the Cowboys wound up leapfrogging the Philadelphia Eagles and the Lions just wound up with the 1 seed and Dallas was the 2. You would want to be the 1 seed. That goes without saying. But the reason we are advising you to root for the Lions over the Saints, and this is still kind of a matter of opinion, is because the Saints are 5-6. The Saints are right there. The Saints are in the wild card mix, and the Saints are a contender for the NFC South crown. We want the NFC South winner to be as bad as possible. And I think you can make an argument, and this is what Jess did in his article, that you would rather see the Cowboys visit the Atlanta Falcons than the New Orleans Saints. I don't believe in the Falcons offense at all. I don't think anybody believes in the Falcons offense at all. So if the Saints lose, it obviously, gives the Falcons much better odds of winning their division, so they don't have to deal with the Saints coming for it the way they took it from them this past week. And that being said, even if the Lions win, even if the Lions keep pace with the Cowboys from a record standpoint, the reason that we are not afraid of this potential is because the Cowboys still control their own fate against the Lions. If the Lions and Cowboys were to both win out until week 17, then guess what? The Cowboys can ultimately take care of business themselves, beat the Lions themselves, and potentially earn the 1 seed in the process. All of these things are hypotheticals and based on ifs and ands and, extrapolations and, trying to look as far as we can into the future, blah, 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 blah. But that is why if you take a look once more at our rooting guide, we are suggesting rooting for the Lions over the Saints, the Niners over the Eagles, the Browns over the Rams, and the Chiefs over the Packers. If you want to get a little bit more into it and say you want to see the Falcons win so they can keep, lengthening their lead in the NFC South, that's completely and totally up to you, but that's a little bit too far into the weeds as far as I'm willing to go at this particular point in time. But this is our Week 13 Dallas Cowboys fan rooting guide here at Blogging the Boys. My name is RJ Ochoa. As mentioned, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Threads at RJ Ochoa, on TikTok, RJ.Ochoa. You will see photos and videos of my dogs occasionally there because they are apparently misbehaved and want to appear here on our productions. Thanks so much for hanging out, everybody. If you haven't yet, once again, please consider subscribing to the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. That really helps us out. Have a great, wonderful, fantastic weekend, and I'll see you next week when we get ready for the Dallas Cowboys to host the Philadelphia Eagles.